I am Tim, and this is Selfless Awakening, where I like to ground all of this spiritual stuff. If you see me looking back and forth a little bit, it's because I'm doing a live Instagram video right here. And then I'm also going to be mostly talking into the, I have an itch here. I'm going to be mostly talking into the camera for the YouTube video, okay? So this is day 6 of 30 Days of Awakening. I'm doing a video every day for 30 days where I talk about awakening, the evolution of higher consciousness, becoming present to the internal experiences and dimensions inside of yourself, all those kinds of things, okay? So what came to my mind today was this. I wanted to talk about this video that I was watching where neuroscientist David Eagleman was talking with Sadhguru. And it's a fascinating interview because you can see David Eagleman's mind, very science-based, logic-based, although a very beautiful mind, you know, but very much from the science sort of focus, and open. Like, he's a very open guy. I'm not saying he's limited in his openness to understand. I will talk more about my impression of him in a second. But then Sadhguru is sitting there and they're having this scientific / mystical talk. It was really interesting and great. And I'm not sure how much I want to get into talking about that actual interview. Hey, how are you, Mantra Ceramic? Thanks for stopping by. Right now, what I want to talk about is this. I want to talk about how the naysayer part of my mind, the skeptical part of my mind, the part of my mind that needs empirical data to sort of think something is truthful or worthy of understanding, that part of my mind, that scientific part of my mind, is the exact part of my mind that led me on my spiritual path. And this is my belief. I believe science takes us on the path of spirit. If we do the experiment, okay? We need to do the experiment of spirituality. And that's the great thing about science is all about scientific method. It's about experimentation. It's about trying things, actually trying things, and then seeing what the result is through the experience of the person trying the thing, right? Like, science is all about experimentation, and that skeptical, the part of my mind that when I was in my early 20s and I was full of ego, I thought it was smart, and I liked to argue with anyone that wanted to talk about religion or spirituality, and I would go into my diatribe about atheism and all these kinds of things. And like, that was pretty much, that was where I identified myself. And through that thinking, I came to a realization where I was like, well, if I'm really a scientific explorer in this world, then I would do the experiment of trying some of the spiritual stuff that people say, these actual practices like sitting quiet, meditating, and learning how to quiet the voice in your head, learning how to step out of it. Concepts like law of attraction, you know, these things that were, to my understanding of the world at that time, they were woo-woo things. I hadn't actually tried them, but I judged them. And so I realized that in my scientific exploration of life and of the world, that I have to try some of these experiments. I have to do these, like, try these things that are part of what I consider to be spiritual practices, and then see what my result is, you know. Things like, you know, like this concept of there is no coincidence, right? Like, what is that about in the universe? Like, there is no coincidence. But isn't it magical how sometimes when you're in a really high vibrating And what I mean by high vibrating is, to the scientific person, if you're watching this right now, I mean, you're super in a positive mood. You're very excited about life. You feel good. Everything's really great. It's like when you're in this high vibrating place, you're having a whole different experience. And sometimes inside of this different experience, you'll think of someone and then they call. Or you need a plumber and they knock on the door. These serendipitous type things. It's kind of crazy, right? Like, so then, like, let's say you do the experiment, the scientific experiment of, well, I'm going to do the experiment that I'm going to try to pay attention to what states of being or what emotional states I'm in, and do these coincidences happen more frequently in one than the other, right? That's a scientific experiment, right? That's a scientific experiment used in the spiritual world, right? So it's so interesting how the mind works, in that it likes to say science is this, spirit is this. But this is all human experience. And what I really believe the issue is with science, when we get to this idea of where science, I think, gets can be slowing down the evolution of human consciousness, I guess that's a good way to say it, is in that science has a tendency to make us identified with the mind's ability to make sense of things. And when I say mind, I mean the logical part of the brain, the part of the brain that says, well, if this happens, then this happens. If A goes to B, then B needs to go to C. And it's like we have a part of our intellect that's it's striving to make sense of things, right? And it's, as much as that's a beautiful thing, that's a very limited part of the human experience. You can step out of the part of you that's trying to figure things out and still have experiences. Like the part of you that a lot of people think that's the only part of them. It's like, I am a body, I am a mind. When this brain dies, consciousness is over, which may or may not be true, doesn't matter. Like, the mind is the thing trying to figure out whether it is or isn't true. There's an experience to be had even out of that, figuring it out. There's an experience to be had where that whole dialogue exists within a constant awareness that is actually the real you. And this is where it gets all trippy for people. It's like, if you haven't had experiences where you've really understood the inner dimension of yourself, then all of this is heady, all of this is theoretical, all of this is science. It's just ideas, like one other idea, like I could swim, I could eat lunch, I could study philosophy, I could do math. It's like, these are ideas and they live in the idea realm. But that's not actually the experiencer of the universe, is not this being that has all these ideas. You can sit down and have experiences where all of the idea part of you, the mind-generated part of you, quiets. You can turn the whole game off. You can stop the voice in your head. You can turn it off. And you can sit inside of whatever is actually you, which is this constant non-physical awareness. That the only thing that I think is close to an actual you out there is that we, as this conscious field of awareness, that we always are, even when we're pretending to be a person, or like I'm Tim, or I'm pretending to be Tim. I'm not actually Tim. I'm pretending to be Tim right now for all of you, but I'm actually the awareness of Tim watching Tim talk. Like, that's the actual truth of what's happening with all of us. And when I talk to you and you think you are your name, then you're not identified with the truth of who you are. You're caught up in the story of your life. And that's not actually who you are. You are the deeper, you're the awareness. You're the actual attention. You're the focus itself. And you can choose where to focus. Like, that's the gift of this human life, you know? So learning the truth of who we are, learning this inner dimension of self, learning this non-physical self takes the scientific mind and says, hey, that's awesome. I have one of those in the vastness of awareness that I truly am. But that's not who I am. This empirical data-seeking part of me is not who I am. It's truly, if we want to be really, what I believe, like really accurate with language, that scientific part of us is something that comes up inside of the truth of who we are, which is this non-physical awareness, right? So, that's my point. Follow science. Let the curiosity of science, this is my encouragement. If you're a sciencey mind and you're kind of doubting, first of all, if you're a sciencey mind, I doubt you're watching, you've gotten this far in my video by this point. But, you know, if you are, I challenge you, do the scientific experiment on spiritual practices and just report back your findings. Report back your actual experiences. Because that's what this is all about. This isn't about some, you know, saying namaste the right way and having the right scarves or the right incense or the right whatever. Like, it's not even about looking spiritual. Like, that's so not it at all. This is about the actual experience, the experiences of stepping out of the identification with self being something that's not self, that isn't the actual truth of self. The truth of self is the constant non-physical awareness. And when we learn how to live more and more of our waking moments as the witness, as this field of alive, excited, blissful, playful stillness, whatever you want to call it, when we learn how to live in that inner dimension and not get caught up in the story of our lives, that's the real jam right there. That's what we're aiming to do. And that's where the bliss and that's where you see every moment you're in, you see it, you live it. It's like everything you will be most alive when you're living in that inner dimension of self. And the thing is, it's all about developing spiritual practices that help you break out of that narrow bandwidth of mind identification. The voice in your head, chattering and analyzing. You know, we're carrying around these voices in our head that are non-stop talking all the time. Whether we're aware of it or not, this voice in the head is going all the time. And we think we are that voice. You're not that voice. You are the awareness of that voice. And you can shut that voice off when you practice. And that's where the spiritual practice comes in. It's as simple and as hard as this. It's learning how to practice the constant identification with self being the awareness around which everything occurs in. The awareness that the thoughts occur in, the awareness that is around the body, and you learn to practice living in that. You can do that through sitting still for 30 or 40 minutes in the morning. That'll really pop you out. You can do it through doing certain practices, being in nature, yoga stretches, provided that you're not doing like exercise yoga, but you're doing like real still yoga. There's so many ways to get into the inner dimension, the identification with the inner dimension of self that is the non-physical. But that's the game, that's the quest. Inside is the journey. And the more you practice the inside journey, the more blissful and the more ecstatic and the more in the moment you'll be. And let the scientific part of your mind, like, don't discard that. That was what I did, was I let the scientific part of my mind actually work. And it was the questioning part of the scientific part of my mind led me to the spiritual experiences. The constant doubting, the questioning, I was like, okay, a true scientific mind will do the experiments of spirituality. If someone's not a true scientific mind, they're not really an open mind. So all roads lead to spirituality. That's been my experience. So, okay, that's all I have to say. I'm going to go grab some food with Jesse. Sending you guys all love. And this is day 6. Let science point to spirit. So if you're connecting on Instagram, I'll be on tomorrow with day 7. And if you're seeing this video on YouTube, stay tuned. I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.